The Danish Gambit begins with e4, e5, d4, e takes d4. White can recover the pawn with his queen and play the center game, or he can push the pawn to c3, and this is the Danish Gambit. Black can decline the gambit in various ways, or he can accept that pawn. Now white can recover the pawn with his knight, but white often plays bishop to c4 and gambits a second pawn. Black can take the pawn on b2, and white takes back with his bishop. So white has sacrificed two pawns for rapid development and an attack. Notice his bishops are very strong here, pointed towards the king side, pointed at the weak f7 square, and the dark squared bishop is pointed at g7, which keeps this bishop on f8 at home. The d file is also open for the queen, and white also plays the queen to b3 sometimes, making a battery along this diagonal. So it's quite a dangerous opening to face. It was popular in the 19th century amongst master players, but it's no longer played today. One of the reasons it's no longer played today is because of the defensive move invented by a strong player named Carl Schlechter, d5. Carl Schlechter, by the way, once played for the World Championship title against Emanuel Lasker in 1910. And it's kind of a tragic story. It was a 10-game match, and Schlechter was up by 1 point after 9 games going into the final game. In the final game, Schlechter built up a strong winning position, but then made a blunder which brought the position to a draw. They played some more moves, and Schlechter blundered again, turning the drawn position into a loss, and Emanuel Lasker won the game and tied up the score and retained the title. And Schlechter never got another chance at the World Championship. But this move d5 is due to him, and the point is black is giving back one of his pawns in order to hasten his own development for defensive purposes. So notice he's attacking the bishop on c4, gaining time. He opened a diagonal for his bishop, but he's also hoping to open up the d file for a possible trade of queens. And the main line continues bishop takes d5, knight f6 comes and hits this bishop with tempo again. Before we take a look at that main line though, let's look at some other possible responses here. White might take the pawn with another piece, like the pawn on e4 or the queen. Well, e takes d4 blocks his own bishop from attacking, so it's counter to white's philosophy in this opening. Black could continue with knight f6, blunting the b2 bishop, and then whichever knight white decides to develop here, like knight f3, black can continue with bishop to d6, fixing this pawn on d5, keeping that bishop out of play and getting ready for castling. And black doesn't fear the move queen to e2 check. He would simply block with his queen, and he's happy to trade queens when white is attacking. So black's doing quite well in this position, a pawn up. Okay, maybe white tries to take with the queen. Well, again, that's counter to his attacking philosophy because black is happy to trade queens in this position, and white's attacking chances have been diminished. You can follow up with knight to f6, attacking another one of white's active pieces. Okay, and you can move your bishop out and get castled quickly. Okay, another possible move here, since the bishop is under attack, is to retreat it. Maybe move it to b3. Okay, well after that, black can play knight to f6 again, hitting the pawn on e4, bolstering his own pawn on d5. Okay, and white doesn't have too many productive moves to make here. He can try taking the pawn on d5, but he doesn't want to take it with his bishop and admit to wasting time moving the bishop back and forth. Can't take it with the queen, it's defended by the knight. So he can take it with his pawn, but then again black plays bishop to d6, fixing that pawn in place, getting ready to castle. and he's fine. Black is doing well again, a pawn up. Another move that white might consider is e5, harassing this knight. But that's not such a good move because it's just driving the knight to a very strong central square on e4. Okay, and from e4 it can't even be driven away. There's a standard tactic. If white plays f3, then queen to h4 check forces the black king to move. Because g3 is no good because of knight takes g3, and this pawn is pinned. If you take the knight, you lose your rook in the corner. So that knight is very strong in the center, and black has a better position. Okay, so back to the main line. After Schlechter's defense d5, white continues forward by taking the pawn with his bishop. Then black attacks the bishop with his knight, gaining more time, trying to trade off one of white's aggressive pieces. And here the main line is a tactical explosion. Bishop takes f7 check. And we'll get back to that in just a minute. But I wanted to mention another possibility in this position. After the main line, bishop takes f7 check, we'll see that the opening kind of settles into an even position. And it's not at all the type of position that gambit players on the white side want to play. And it's why this opening soon fell out of favor in the early 1900s. Okay. But it was, some people attempted to revive this opening with the move knight to c3, developing another piece and protecting the bishop. Now, if you do that, though, black can diffuse the situation. He can play knight takes d5, and then if knight takes d5 here, black would like to drive the knight away with c6, but he has to play knight d7 first. The reason for that is c6 runs into the tactic knight to f6 check. Okay. And that knight is guarded by the bishop on b2, so the queen cannot take it. The pawn would take it, but that runs into a trade of queens followed by a fork from f6, and white's up material. So before pushing to c6, black has to play this knight to d7 to shield his queen from that tactic. Okay, and then white will play something like maybe knight f3, and then you can drive the knight back. Okay, and black again is doing fine in that position. So back to the main line. After knight to f6, white takes on f7. And this introduces another standard tactic in the opening. Black captures the bishop, and his king has been drawn away from the protection of his own queen, and white takes it. In fact, white's forced to take that queen in this position because he just gave up a piece. Black is up a piece in this position, and there's no better move. So white takes the queen, but then black has the counter bishop to b4 check with a discovery on the white queen. This check cannot be blocked by a minor piece because black would just take the queen and remain a piece up. So white has to block with queen to d2. Okay, black recovers the queen, white takes the bishop, and if you look at the position here, the material is exactly equal. And the evaluation is about equal, although some people say that black is doing better because of his queenside majority, and that's going to favor him in the endgame. Okay, so this position is not what white had in mind in playing the Danish Gambit. White wanted a quick attack on the black king, not an equal endgame. Okay, I'll mention just a couple things about this position. Black would like to play rook to e8 to hit this pawn and gain some time, and to be able to tuck his king back to g8 in some potential cases. For example, this knight on g1 is going to come out very quickly and possibly give a check here to the black king. And black wants this rook out of the way in case he wants to step back from that check. Black also has to decide how to develop his queenside minor pieces. Well, for this knight on b8, I suggest moving it to the unusual square a6. It has more possibilities from a6 than it does from c6. Not only can it go to b4, but it can also go to c5, and from c5 it would be hitting the e4 pawn, but it would also be threatening knight to d3, forking the king and the bishop. Okay, so one line might go rook to e8, attacking the pawn, and white can passively defend it. Most players would play f3 in this position. And then you can go ahead and continue to develop your pieces, get your queenside activated, and you've slowed down white's development a bit, blocking the square from this knight. So this knight has to develop either to h3 or e2. Okay, I will mention one other move here though. After attacking the pawn on e4, it turns out white can play knight f3 and ignore that threat. It's a poisoned pawn. In this position, you should either develop your knight or drop your king back. Okay, those are the best moves. If you take the pawn, you're going to face a tactic. Knight to e5 check. The knight is bolstered by the bishop on b2, and the rook has just been cut off from the defense of the knight here on e4. So either you move your king away and lose your knight, or you sack the exchange like this. Okay. And then face the loss of another pawn here on c7. Or you can drop back here, I suppose. Okay, so either way you're going to lose material. All right, so be careful of tactics in a wide open position like this. All right, that's it for the Schlechter defense to the Danish Gambit. Thanks for watching the video.